to the Starry-Eyed podcast. My name is Brendan.
And I'm Jen. On this show, we chat about all things Williams syndrome.
The ups and downs and what it's like living with.
And being a parent to someone with
Williams syndrome.
We're excited to share our community with you. Thanks for being here.
Covered the whole gamut today with our amazing guests. We've been talking.
We went in today
talking about Anja. She's someone who has excitedly emailed and submitted multiple times to be a guest on this podcast for a very long time. She's been waiting. So
she's fun. What we needed today. We needed that energy.
Yeah. So she was great. Yeah, she was super fun. And lives on her own, but in a group home. I loved that. I loved hearing about that experience. That's something that I think about a bunch.
Yeah.
Not for my son, but for me. I might end up having to live in a group home because I probably shouldn't be out on my own at all.
I think it sounds fun. I think it sounds great. I'm like, people like there's food there, there's activities.
Yeah, I like how she talked about they do they do go do a lot of activities together, but yet they also are living independent lives and stuff.
Not all group homes are great.
No, you're absolutely right. Not all group homes are great.
Yeah, we definitely need more housing that is like group-based, that is fun and cool. Her energy is great. Yeah. She's a real cutie. I actually am going to Minnesota, I think in April. I think I'm going to where she's at. So I should
hit her up. Hit her up, girl.
Any particular reason?
Yeah, for a dance convention.
Get out, really?
We're going for one dance. That's it. One. Yeah, Greer and I. So she's a competitive dancer, and she has this one dance that she has to do. So we have to go all the way to Minnesota for that one dance. Who says I'm not a good mom?
No one is ever saying that. No one is ever saying. No one would ever say you're not a good mom to your face.
Exactly.
You are a great mom, Jen, just so you know.
Trying to hold it together. Well, I mean, after you listen to all the questions I asked Dr. Barnhardt and Becca, I remember the last name of one and the first name of another. It sounded like I don't know what I'm doing.
No, I would wholeheartedly disagree with that.
About autism and Williams syndrome and sort of how you get an autism diagnosis, if that's the right approach for you and your child. Is there a benefit of doing that locally? Is that a benefit of doing that like at a Williams syndrome clinic, like what they offer there in Columbus? It's very interesting. Like I said, in retrospect, like had I known then what I know now, I really wish that we would have started our Williams syndrome journey by like utilizing those services. Yeah. Now I'm like, oh, I mean, you can always, there's no wrong way.
Right.
But I just think like having a group of people that understand Williams syndrome collectively and how that works in various parts of the body, and then bringing those experts together to create like a comprehensive plan for your person. I mean, it just like makes sense. Okay. So happy Tuesday, because it's not going to be Thursday. Happy Tuesday. We hope you enjoy listening to this podcast. And if it brings up any questions, send them to us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, feel free to ask.
Apparently,
what are the different ways?
Hold on. Apparently, I just used the word absolutely, and I'm not happy about that.
Absolutely. You can email us. You can get on the Facebook chat. YouTube. They can drop a comment.
Leave a comment. Leave a comment on the audio podcast. Leave a comment, on Apple Podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating. We'll take that. We're not gonna, even if you don't like us, give us that 5-star rating. Come on,
you want to do it.
Give them out.
Do it.
All right, everybody. Let's get to it. Croutons.
Let's go.
croutons and heart. Okay, yep, I screwed up. Okay, yep. Jen did it right. Croutons and heart.
And
Croutons
hearts.
and hearts.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yay!
Yay!
Woohoo! Let's go. All right. Well, hello, Anya. How are you?
Good. I'm a little bit nervous because this is my first time on a podcast. So,
Don't worry. You'll be just fine. You're in good hands with us. So,
okay, sounds good.
yeah. So, for those who don't know who you are, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi,
And-
I am Anya. I am 22 and I have Williams syndrome.
Awesome.
You were ready. You were ready to go. Well, you have to tell us more about yourself. Where do you live?
I live in a group home
Okay.
in Brainerd. I work at TJ Maxx. I do fun things with friends and I like makeup
And music, right?
and music. I love Pink. Pink is my favorite artist.
Pink is
And
awesome.
the color that you're wearing today.
Yeah.
22, you live in Brainerd. Did you grow up there?
No, I grew up in Pequot.
Okay, is that also in Minnesota?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, so how old were you when you were diagnosed with Williams syndrome, Anya? Do you remember?
No, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That's okay. Do you remember knowing about it from like when you were little?
Yeah, when I was little.
Okay. And like, how did you live in the same place, like all growing up, or did you?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
How was that?
Good. My brother, his name is Cole. He supported me all through high school and middle school and kindergarten. Like,
Nice.
yeah.
It's awesome. Family support is always a great.
Mm-hmm.
How old is Cole?
He's the same age as me. He's 22, so I have a twin.
Oh, you were okay. I love this. We should have had your brother on too. I've always wanted to interview twins of Williams syndrome. So he does he have Williams syndrome?
No.
Okay. So you guys were like the same grades all through school.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, cool. And how was school for you?
A little bit difficult because like there were bullies at my school that would like be rude to me.
Yeah.
And stuff.
Gross.
Yeah.
That's a bummer. So did you like school? Did you not?
I loved school.
What part of it did you like?
Gym.
Oh, that's
Okay.
surprising. Not a lot of people say gym. Why did you like gym?
Because my gym teacher was really nice.
Okay,
Oh.
cool. Did you play music in school?
No. I mean,
No.
I sang in the choir, but like that's all I did.
Yeah, that's all you did. That's the most important. I love people who are singers. So
Yeah.
then after school, so you grew up in the same like town all through, okay. And
Yeah.
then is it just when you went, like you became an adult that you moved to Brainerd, or how did
Yeah. Like I moved here last year.
you? Okay, last
So
year,
I've been here at my group home for a year.
a year. Okay, well, tell us about that change. That's a big life change.
I know. The first 2 weeks were kind of difficult for me because I wanted my mom and dad all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
And like this was my idea to move into a group home. Like ever since I was little, like all I wanted to do was move into a group home
You
to
just
be
wanted
more
to be by yourself.
independent.
Yeah.
And how did you find this place that you're in now? What's it called?
Clark Lake Homes.
Okay, how'd you find this?
My grandma's friend, her name is Shelly. She found her family runs it, and then like another person was living here, but then I took her spot basically.
Okay.
Mm.
And so you've been there for a year. First couple weeks were hard,
Yeah.
but then like what changed? Because now you said you love it.
Like the atmosphere is fun here.
Yeah. What's your favorite part about living on your own?
My favorite part of living on my own, I know this might seem weird, but calling my parents good night every night. Like that's what
Oh,
I do every night.
That's awesome.
You like
Not
that?
weird
Are
at
you?
all.
Okay, so you have a room by yourself.
Yeah. And then other people who live here have their own rooms too.
Okay. And so how many people live in the facility that you're at?
For others.
4 others. Oh, it's pretty like
Yeah.
small basement. That's cool.
Yeah. And we get to go bowling and like we get to go out to eat, we get to do personal needs shopping. It's like so fun.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
You do that when you're not working?
Yes. On Wednesdays, we do bowling, and then on Tuesdays, we go personal needs shopping. And yeah.
Get all your stuff, yeah, for the week. Okay, so there's 4 other people who live in the same place that you do.
Yeah.
Does anybody have a disability? Or
Yeah. It's all disabilities, so.
disabilities. And have you made a good friend there?
Yes.
Okay. Who's your friend? You want to shout them out?
This is a shout out to Abby, mom and dad, my other friend Abby, my friend Trinity, my friend Cora, my friend Maddie, and all the rest of my family.
All the rest of your family. Cole doesn't get his own shout out?
No, Cole does. This is a shout out to Cole.
Okay.
Yay.
Do you have other brothers and sisters?
No.
No,
We're just
okay.
the only 2.
Okay, well then it's good that we shouted him out for all the work that he's done, right?
Yeah.
With you. So you work at TJ Maxx. How many hours a week do you work there?
Once to twice a week, 4 hours.
Yeah, 4 hours. And how long have you been working there?
A year.
So you moved and you got a job and a new apartment at the same time.
Yes.
Oh, that's a lot of change.
I know.
Yeah, a lot of good change, though.
Was that stressful, or did you like it?
It was stressful for me because of my anxiety and depression. Like, when I first moved in here, like, my anxiety and depression plummeted.
Yeah.
Like, very bad.
Yeah.
But I'm on the right medicines now, which is helping.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Well, I mean, I have anxiety and depression too, and I understand when you change, like when a lot of things change in your life really quick, it can be exciting, but it can also be really stressful.
Yeah.
What else do you do to help manage your stress?
Go on walks, talk to a therapist. Yeah.
And you do makeup, I heard? Is that?
And makeup. Makeup is for fun.
Makeup is for fun. Okay. At TJ Maxx, where do you work?
I work in the clothing department. So I hang up clothes all day long.
That sounds so fun. I love clothes, so that would be a really fun job for me. Does it get stressful right now, like when you get into the holidays and it
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Very
very busy in the store.
It's very busy.
Is that your dream job, is to like work in retail, or would you?
Yes.
You want to work in like a clothing store?
Yep.
Yeah. What about makeup? Do you do, like, tell us about this love of makeup.
It started when I was little. I used to play with my mom's makeup a lot, and it was like a fantasy of mine to play with makeup.
Yeah. And now do you watch like tutorials and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite makeup product?
Lip gloss and lipstick.
Okay. You have good lips, so I could see that for you. Like what's your favorite brand of lipstick?
L'Oreal.
L'Oreal. Okay. So you keep it like affordable.
Yep.
That's good. So what else do you like to do? You walk, did you say you play music, or do you just sing now?
I sing. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you do that like in your apartment complex?
Yeah, like in my room.
Oh, in your room.
Yeah. Sometimes I do it out there, but usually I do it in here.
I am also a singer in my room. That's not something that everybody knows about me, but I do. I'll just belt it out.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite? So Pink.
Yeah.
Who else do you like?
I like Olivia Rodrigo and
She's so good.
Sabrina Carpenter and those types of music.
Sabrina
Awesome.
Carpenter. Do you go to concerts?
Yes, I went to a Pink concert.
You did.
Yes.
Those are
and it was in Minneapolis.
Oh my gosh, that would be an amazing concert. It was huge, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was big.
And does that stress you out when there's like that many people and it's so loud?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah, a little bit. My daughter has Williams syndrome also, and she's 14. And a couple years ago, I took her to Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Huge concert. And I would have thought that it's hard, like sounds are loud, like when they're really loud like that can be stressful for her. But she really liked it. So
really?
It's like, only sometimes are those like loud sounds annoying to her. Like people screaming and cheering and the loud music. She really, really, really liked it.
Yeah. Wow.
I know.
That's cool.
Are you like that, Brendan? Can you tolerate concerts?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I bring earplugs, so I wear them to every, you know, as a when I worked for MTV, I traveled so much and played so many shows without wearing earplugs and doing the
Same.
right thing with my ears. I got tinnitus in both ears. I had it for 3 months, and it was horrible. So after that, I was like, okay, I need to be more proactive about protecting my ears and my hearing.
Yeah.
So now I wear earplugs to almost every single show, even when I practice.
Are you in a band?
I was,
Still
but
are.
not here and there. I was in a band. I had my own band for 10 years.
Yeah. Do you know Brendan, Anya?
Not really.
Oh.
Yeah,
Well,
it was called the Can Do Band, and every person in the band had Williams syndrome.
Wow.
Yeah, we were together for almost 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
and Brendan was on MTV. Did you hear him say that?
Yes.
He's like,
Yeah. Yeah. I worked on a show called How's Your News, and it was about a group of individuals. There was two others on the show that had Williams syndrome as well.
Wow.
And there were other people on the show that had other disabilities. We traveled as a news group and a band. So we filmed off and on for 6 months, and then 6 months later the show aired. And
Wow.
yep, there was only one season, but yeah, it was definitely interesting time in my life,
Yeah.
because I was also taking full-time night classes, music classes,
Wow.
at the same time. So during, when I wasn't filming, I was going to school and traveling back and forth for that, and living on my own in an apartment with
Wow.
the people on the show. So it was a lot.
are you like the same age as Anya is now? How old were you?
I was underage. I was 20,
Oh, yeah.
just about pretty close.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was 20, so I didn't party or, I just chilled out and, went to the parties, but never, indulged in any of the adult things,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that like, Anya, for you, like, how is it being an adult and living on your own? Do you like to go to parties? Like, what do you do for fun?
I go to my parents' house
Yeah.
and it's kind of like a vacation for me, if you know what I mean.
How far are they from you?
Like 30 minutes.
30 minutes. Okay. And they come in,
And
or do you drive?
I can't drive, so they have to pick me up.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's kind of like a vacation because like I get to have alcoholic drinks and have fun over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, leave a mess and not have to clean it up, right? That's
Yeah.
You.
Do you still have a room at your parents' house? Because that's a thing that happens, like when you move out, then sometimes your parents, they take that room back over and they turn it into an exercise room or a room where they do their hobbies.
No,
It
I got to keep my room.
Okay, that's very nice. I like
Yes.
that.
I got to keep my room too when I moved
Go,
out.
Mom and Dad, for letting me keep my room.
Yes.
Yeah,
so
right. Raise the roof.
Brendan has his house. So I don't know, how long did you live by yourself, Brendan?
A year.
Okay. And then did you move back home?
Yes, after that, things didn't work out in the end, but which is fine. It happened,
Yeah.
I'm still very close to the person that I was rooming with. He was in my band. So yeah, shout out to Lucas. I love you, dude. Yeah,
Now
I
Brendan
moved back.
built a music shed.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I moved back with my parents, and then, got my certificate in music and music education. And then, yeah, we moved into this house 8 years ago this month.
Mm-hmm.
So,
What exciting things are in store for you, Anya? Like, as you're navigating adulthood, what things are you hoping to do?
I get to go on a cruise this summer
Okay.
with the Williams syndrome.
You're going on the cruise. Okay, that's fun.
Yeah.
I just for you? First cruise?
Yeah, first one.
Oh, that's going to be so fun. What are you looking forward to with that?
Just relaxing and meeting new friends and having fun.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Yeah, do you go to conventions?
Yes.
Okay, I've never met you. How have I not met you?
I don't know.
You're real cute, and you seem like real fun. Have I met your brother? Does he volunteer at the Williams Syndrome conventions?
No, but I'm hoping that mom and dad make him next year.
Okay, we can ask him. Paul, will you volunteer with us?
Come and volunteer with us in 2026, Cole. Please.
Does he have a job?
Yeah, he's a biomedical engineering tech.
Oh, okay.
So he messes with cells, basically.
Yeah, that's
Well, all right.
maybe he won't be able to take a week off then of work.
No, probably not.
That's the hard part about work. Well, so like as we wrap up our time, Anja, is there anything that you want everybody to know about you that we didn't talk about, or is there something you want to talk about with Williams syndrome?
I just want everybody to know that having Williams syndrome is awesome. Don't let people bully you because you are different. Everybody's really unique in their own different ways.
Yeah.
And I hope everybody out there knows that people with Williams syndrome are awesome and amazing people and authentic people.
Very
Do you
true.
have any tips for anybody who like is struggling with bullying or with like feeling anxious or
Talk to your mom and dad about seeing a therapist if you're anxious.
Yeah.
do you think that's helpful?
Yeah, it's helpful for me.
Yeah, just to talk about it is
Yeah.
helpful? Yeah, and did they give you some like tips on how to manage that stress?
Yeah. Like one therapist taught me the talk 10 things countdown thing that I do sometimes.
Yeah, what is that?
So like you talk about 10 things that you like to do, 9 things that make you happy, 8 things that you like to do, 7 things that bring you joy, 6 like different things, and then 5 different things, and then 4 different things, and then 3 different things, and then 2 different things, and 1 different thing.
So by the time you get through that list, you found all these things that like make you happy. I love that idea.
Yeah.
And that does, I assume, bring your stress down because you've thought of all these good things. And once you think about all the good things in your life, it's hard to then struggle with one little thing that may not be going your way, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Do you have any good tips, Brendan, for people who are struggling with like stress?
I know it's different for everybody, but I tend to not stress about the little things. But usually for me, if I do get stressed or I'm anxious, I do a lot of deep breathing. I find that like getting yourself centered and like taking like a really deep breath in and then holding it for like 4 or 5 seconds and letting it go very slow in and out really helps to like get my heart rate down and things of that nature. Yeah.
Ooh, that's a good one. I like that breathing technique as well. I'm not good.
That's called. Yeah.
What's it called?
Square breathing. So you breathe in for like 4 seconds.
And then over and then, yeah.
And then repeat it like 4 or 5 different times. And then usually it's only what takes me that long. And then I'm usually good to go.
Yeah, I think those are all great things to help with stress. Do holidays give you guys stress, either of you?
Yeah, me.
Yeah, why?
Because I know that I seem like a people person, but when it comes to family, it just seems too much.
Oh, so you like being with your family, but not so much?
I mean, I like being around them, but sometimes it just gets overwhelming.
Yeah, I feel you.
I like spending time with my family, but another thing, related to stress and anxiety, I also reminders like you're okay, you're going to be okay, everything is going to be okay, nothing's wrong. You don't need to let things get to the level that you think that they're going to get, because in the end, everything will be all right, even if it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those
Gentle reminders and self affirmations and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I love that. So you're looking forward to the Williams syndrome cruise. You want everybody to know that people with Williams syndrome they're awesome, and I agree with you. You guys are awesome. What else do you want people to know?
That it's okay not to be okay. And
Yeah.
sure that you talk to someone if you're not okay.
I love
Yeah.
that. That is so great. Do you have people at your apartment that you can talk to, like if you ever feel that way? Because sometimes it just comes
Yeah.
on sudden.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I learned it's okay to not be okay. Actually at the end of the convention in Baltimore, we had, some of the adults have those classes at the end, and you pick the class, and at that point in time I was, there was a lot going on in my life, and that had led up to the convention. And I really needed that reminder that, like, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to feel how you feel, because your feelings are valid and your feelings matter.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I've heard you say that a lot too, Brendan, before. You've said that many times. So I think that's cool that you got that from convention.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I had realized it a little bit before, but then once I went to the convention and was going through what I was going through, then it really like hit home.
Yeah, my daughter Stella has a lot of emotions, and one of the things that I say about her is that her feelings that she's sharing with everybody, they're not unique in the sense that, like, we're all feeling that way too. It's just like, but most of us keep it on the inside. And so like, I appreciate that she shares it and that she is so vulnerable with sharing it, because I think that more of us should, because it like makes you feel weird when you go, gosh, I'm the only one who feels this way. And it's like, really, you're not. We're all feeling.
Right. And when you bottle those feelings inside, you become a ticking time bomb.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
if you don't let those feelings out, eventually that ticking time bomb is just going to explode, and it's just going to be a hot mess.
Yeah, I know. Well, that explains a lot about me. I am a hot mess, Brendan. But I agree with you. It's okay not to be okay. I love that. Well, Anja, I will see you at convention.
Okay.
Buffalo.
Yeah. And I will see you at convention too.
Sounds good.
It is so good to meet you.
Yeah, it was great. All right. Well, hello, Elizabeth and Becca. How are you guys?
I'm good. Yeah.
Good,
It's a little
good.
rainy here, but besides that, good.
Right on. Well, for those who don't know who you two are, why don't you guys introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
I'll go first. I'm Elizabeth Barnhardt. I'm a developmental and behavioral pediatrician, Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm one of the co-directors of our Williams Syndrome Clinic. And hi, everyone. I'm Becca Lyren. I am a psychologist, also at Nationwide Children's Hospital, and also part of our Williams Syndrome Clinic.
Yeah, that's great. So for people who are listening, I always am like, some people are in the know. A lot of people like me are not in the know. Can you tell us what all you said and what that means for our community?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I feel like I say developmental and behavioral pediatrician and nobody knows at all what that
We're
means.
like, what is that? What is that?
Yeah, so I love what I do, and I always love talking a little bit about it. So, as a developmental and behavioral pediatrician, I'm a pediatric subspecialist. So, what that means is I have an additional 3 years of training, kind of after a general pediatrics residency, during which I learn a lot more about a wide variety of developmental and behavioral pediatric conditions. So, I spent an additional 3 years learning a lot more about autism, ADHD, anxiety, depression. I take care of a lot of kids with a wide variety of genetic syndromes, including Williams syndrome, which has kind of become one of my major areas of focus in my career. I do a lot of autism assessments in general. I get the pleasure of working on a lot of interdisciplinary teams, like with Dr. Lyren. In general, do a lot of care of really complex kids, and do things like medication management related to ADHD or anxiety and depression for kids with intellectual and developmental disabilities or complex medical or developmental conditions. And then I'm engaged in like research and then a lot of education related to some of those things. I also have several roles with the Ohio State University College of Medicine, and really passionate about teaching. And I'm also really passionate in my career about working with primary care providers to educate them about the care of individuals with autism, as well as other conditions like Williams syndrome that are a little bit more rare that they may not know a ton about. So that's a lot of what I do in my day-to-day.
Okay, yeah, no, that's very helpful. And I have a lot of questions for you now that you've said all that. Okay, so Becca, your turn.
I'm a psychologist, and I think, when people think psychology, you might think of like some of the roles that I do, which is, helping kids, young adults with, or it's like mood concerns or anxiety concerns, behavior concerns. We also do like a lot of other things that people might not think of, traditionally in psychology for. Like I can help with sleep behavior concerns with related to sleep or toileting, or, if you have questions about your child's development, you want to learn how to, maybe help with play skills or socialization, those types of things. So we can wear a lot of hats and kind of help with behavior in a lot of different ways. And so I love my job. I do a lot of what I think of as more like quick consultation-based care. So someone comes in, they tell me, something they want to work on, and my goal is for them to leave with a couple of strategies for them to be able to go try at home. And so like Dr. Barnhardt said, I do a lot of work too on teams. I very much love collaboration, and I think we can get some really good ideas together when we have a psychologist and a medical provider and other team members kind of all working together to look at things from lots of different lenses to make sure, a person's getting kind of all the care and help they need.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So I live in Colorado, and so Williams syndrome is not like super well known here, and certainly don't have like a clinic that specializes in Williams syndrome. So this may sound like a silly question, but I'm going to ask it. So you work at Nationwide, and you see a host of kids with disabilities not specific to Williams syndrome, but then you also have the specialty of working with individuals with Williams syndrome. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And how did you both stumble into that?
I think we both have kind of similar and interesting stories. So I did both my residency and fellowship training in Nationwide, and had the opportunity during my residency training to spend a lot of time in the Williams syndrome clinic, and just really fell in love with the patient population, and got involved, and then kind of became involved with my primary mentor at the time, Dr. Jennifer Walton, who's on the board of the WSA, became engaged in with some research related to Williams syndrome, looking at barriers to care with the Williams syndrome population, in particular looking at difficulties accessing services for patients who may live in areas where there's not Williams syndrome clinics. So that's something else I am particularly interested in as well. So just really enjoyed it, and continued kind of that interest throughout residency and fellowship. And then once I became kind of moved into attendinghood, when the opportunity came, and Dr. Walton kind of pursued other career ventures, and somebody else was needed kind of in the program, I was really excited and kind of jumped at the opportunity to become involved, because I really just enjoyed this population, because our clinic is really fun. Because our patients are really fun, but I also think because the way our clinic is structured, where we really function as a team, it's not only enjoyable, but I feel like we're able to provide really effective care. So to talk a little bit about the DBP aspect of our clinic, we have a much larger team where we have access to other subspecialists as well, but the DBP part of our clinic involves Dr. Lyren and I, as well as our speech, physical, and occupational therapists, all evaluating patients together within the same half day. And so I really just enjoyed that model, because it's really valuable for our patients, and we really function in such a manner that we can really, think about our patients and think about plans kind of as a functional unit, so that we're not just each separately saying recommendations, we're really thinking about it all together. And so I really enjoy that, and see this as a way to really bring together a lot of my interests, because I think the Williams syndrome population is, for me, this very specific merger of like a population where there's a lot of developmental and medical and then mental health needs all kind of lumped together. So I think for developmental and behavioral pediatricians, this is a great like area and place for us to be too.
Yeah,
for sure.
I totally agree. Becca, how about you? So you have a similar story?
So I first started working with children and young adults with Williams syndrome when I was an undergrad at Ohio State, because I worked with Dr. Marilee Martins, who had, helped start the Williams syndrome clinic here. And so I got involved with some of the research, and then I was fortunate that while I was, in undergrad, and shortly thereafter, we had the convention in Columbus, and so I was able to help with that. And I just, loved the work that she was doing, and loved meeting and working with all the families. And so, similarly to Dr. Barnhardt, when Dr. Martins had decided that she was going to retire, she had asked me, if I would be willing to take over the clinic. And I, joked that I was like, man, if we could do this together, that would be amazing, because you are, so wonderful to work with. And I wish you would be able to work here forever. But I'm also so excited at this opportunity. Like, thank you so much, because it's just been so wonderful. So I was really thankful for her for, thinking of me, and for me kind of continuing to get to do the work.
So for many people who listen to the show, they are connected to Williams syndrome in one way or another. But sometimes we get the random listener who has no connection to Williams syndrome, or maybe is new to the community for the first time. And so they're using this as a tool to get information. And our community is really fun. People underestimate that, right? Like, because when you get, at least for us, when we got Stella, my daughter Stella's 14, when she was diagnosed with Williams syndrome at age 5, immediately there's all this like bad stuff thrown at you, right? Like, I just remember those first 2 weeks, and it was like, just bad news, right? And then we went to our first Williams syndrome convention in Columbus, and I was like, oh, this community is so fun. And ever since then, it's yes, there's the things that are hard, and we navigate through those, and they can be real struggles, but it's like also met with this amazing community who is so empathetic, who's so caring, who are so fun and outgoing. I always say this now, we just went to Arizona. That was our last convention. And it's like, I am exhausted by the time I leave these conventions, because I feel like I've just been out partying
Yeah.
all day long. It's like, I'm learning a lot, but I'm also having so much fun. And it's a dichotomy that we ride for sure.
Yeah.
I was so impressed when we landed in Arizona, because of the time change. It was like kind of early, and I was like, man, I am so tired. I'm going to check in and go to bed. And there were so many people out and about, like, we're ready to get the night started. Like, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to bed. I'll see everyone tomorrow. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah. And the time change, because you're East Coast, right? So that's 3 hours. It was a big time change for you guys.
Yeah.
I assume.
Yeah. For me too.
But I feel like we landed, and then we started walking around, and we're energized by just everybody else that we were running into, and and so
absolutely. And did I hear that you did have a talk at the Arizona convention? Okay, tell me about that, because I don't know how I missed it, but I did. And that might have been that sometimes with my husband and I say, like, I'm going to go to these and you go to the other ones, but then he doesn't do a great job of communicating back to me what he learned. So tell me what you guys talked about, because I'm very interested in this topic.
Yeah, we talked about a couple things that I think, in a few different talks that I think are all kind of related. We did a talk with Dr. Bonnie Klein-Tasman on kind of the overlap between Williams syndrome and autism, and she really is the leading expert in this field who's done a lot of research, and we cited a lot of her work in our talk. We also did a separate talk that was really highly attended on sleep-related challenges in Williams syndrome, which I think has pertinence to this conversation about autism, because a lot of individuals with autism have sleeping difficulties as well. And then we did another talk kind of on kind of in early childhood and kind of early developmentally what to expect, kind of as like a talk for parents kind of at the start of their journey, what to expect and kind of how to get plugged in and what to do kind of initially when figuring things out.
Okay, that makes sense, because I did have my husband go to, and I feel so bad, he'll probably listen to this and be like, you push me like down the river, and I totally am, but I had sent him to this autism conversation. Our daughter Stella there's no doubt in my mind that she could be dual diagnosis. I have never had her formally diagnosed just because I was like, it takes a long time and I don't know if it really changes. This is my theory. So you guys tell me different. I was like, I don't know if it changes the care that we give her. So, and I think there is a lot of overlap, right, between like things that are autism related and things that could be Williams syndrome related. And so I haven't done it. But my husband is always like, I don't think she's autistic. And then after your conversation, he came back and was like, yeah, she's totally autistic. So tell us more about that, because maybe many people are in our same boat where they go, are we not? Like, how do we know? And again, do we need a dual diagnosis?
When we think about, to your exact point, like pursuing dual diagnosis, my, number one thought is that, is it, something that the family wants to do, right? And do you feel like it would, does the family feel like it would give more information about services or more information about their child? And to your point, we do see a lot of overlap, which does not, mean that every child with Williams syndrome has autism, right? Like we know, one of the, symptoms that we see in autism can be, being more like sensory seeking or sensory avoiding. We know for a lot of people with Williams syndrome, like sounds are, things that they might be more sensitive to, right? And so if you're looking kind of at some of the overlap, or even like in young kids, if we're seeing that you might be, behind, a little bit behind developmentally, and you're not yet using, pointing to requests, that might be something we're looking for in an autism evaluation, right? So there definitely is, overlap, and a lot of research has found that the percentage of kids with Williams syndrome who also meet criteria for autism is higher than kind of the general overall 1 in 36, kind of in the just overall population. With that being said, if you just said, I'm going to do an autism evaluation on a bunch of kids with Williams syndrome, a lot of them might flag on a lot of things, but that doesn't mean all these kids have autism, right? So it can be a lot to untangle. And you bring up a really good point too, that the wait lists for evaluations, can be really long, and it can be a lot of, time and energy to kind of try and, figure out and do next steps. And so I think, all that to say, I know it can be a very like long and stressful process once you even decide that if someone wants to pursue an evaluation, even knowing like where to go or, what to do, how long you're going to need to wait.
Like 3 years.
Yeah.
In Colorado, I was like, what? This is a long time. I don't know if it was 3 years, but it was really long. It was a really long time. And here in Colorado, at least, I heard, this is like several years ago when we were kind of at least first looking at this, it was like really the main difference for Stella was like whether or not we could get some things covered under insurance or not. And that's where having an autism diagnosis was helpful. And really the main thing that at the time we were looking at was ABA. And then as I started to learn about ABA, I decided that I didn't think it was something I wanted to pursue for Stella. But I have heard, I don't know if you guys hear that too, that like an autism diagnosis is helpful if you're needing certain services.
Yeah, I think on the practical front, that absolutely is a huge consideration, because when it comes to, different community agencies, services, school-based services, insurance companies being willing to pay for things like ABA, autism is a much more well understood diagnosis than Williams syndrome. And the fact of the matter is, ABA, or applied behavior analysis, really is just an instructional method that you can apply to help with things like challenging behaviors. You can apply it to helping with things like activities of daily living. So, you can work on things like toilet training, for example. So I say that to say it can really help a lot of kids, not just kids with autism. And it's usually just that insurance companies don't want to pay for it if you don't have an autism diagnosis. So, it can really help, a wide range of kids that maybe have developmental delays otherwise, or patients with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So, for example, we have some patients that have Williams syndrome without autism diagnoses that are receiving ABA, and it's helpful for some of their areas of weakness, and we are able to get insurance to cover it. But then there's certainly some that their insurance companies wouldn't be willing to cover it. So there's some variability there, and certainly some room for advocacy. So it does become this like practical consideration. And it's something that's really annoying at the system level that we have to think about, the diagnosis from the standpoint of what we have to do to make the insurance company do what we want. I hate that thinking that we have to do sometimes.
Yeah, but it's all right. We got to just shoot our community straight, which is that sometimes you have to do that, right? You have to find what you need to get the services you need. And there's always a way. There's always a way, I say. Yeah, ABA is an interesting thing because Stella, when she was younger, so she wasn't diagnosed until 5. And Brendan actually wasn't diagnosed until he was 13.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Were you
I was
did they think you were autism first?
ADHD actually first. They thought I had ADHD, and then they put me on Ritalin, and then later on, I got diagnosed when I was teen. Yeah.
You were 13, yeah. Well, I was just going to say, like, at least, so by the time Stella was diagnosed, I felt like we were already, like, in motion on a lot of things. And so it was like when she was younger, what I saw was a lot of behaviors, like so many behaviors, all the behaviors. Now, as she's older, I definitely have seen it go less behaviors and more anxiety. Mm-hmm. Do you guys see that in the Williams syndrome population as they age?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's definitely a high rate of comorbid mental health conditions, in particular things like ADHD, which can occur up to a rate of about 65% in Williams syndrome. And then the rates of anxiety are pretty similar, if not higher. So that's definitely something we see. And with those two conditions, there can be a lot of overlap of symptoms with autism, which is pertinent to our conversation here. And so I think that's the other thing that can make autism evaluations in individuals with Williams syndrome particularly tricky. If you think about, anxiety in particular, sometimes if you're anxious, you can maybe be a little bit more rigid about wanting things to be a particular way, or you might demonstrate more repetitive behaviors, maybe like rocking back and forth, or maybe be a little bit more anxious. Or with ADHD, you might, younger children, their play skills might not be what we expect because of inattention, or again, socially, that child may not be demonstrating all the skills we might expect. So it can make it really tricky.
It can be tricky. And I'm realizing that I don't know that I said this in the beginning. I think you said it on my behalf, Dr. Barnhardt, but like evaluations, for things like autism is something that I do also as part of my job. I think you gave me a shout out, but I was like, I don't know that I ever said that. And that's what we're here to talk about. But I think, and the tricky thing too, right, is we know for, something like Williams syndrome, you go and you can get a test and the doctor will say, here you go, here's the results, you have Williams syndrome. Where for autism, right, it's more of observed and reported behaviors, right? There isn't, a blood test or a brain scan or something you can go get to say, yes, this is autism. It's really just based on behaviors. And so I think that, Dr. Barnhardt's point, that's why it's important, you might see a behavior and say, oh, yes, this person, is asking a lot of repetitive questions, but, this feels like it's more due to anxiety, right? And you kind of have to untangle kind of those behaviors, which is why I think, a detailed evaluation can be really helpful, right? Not just necessarily, I'm reading this and I feel like I'm checking all these boxes and then, feeling really like worried or, not sure if you're missing something, that, it could be that you're seeing this behavior and it could be due to something else, right? So that's kind of why we kind of have to figure it out.
Yeah. I definitely feel like we're at the age now where I'm like, what part of this is Williams syndrome? What part of this is being a teenager? What part of this is your genetic inherited anxiety? What part of this is your, ADHD? And it is really tricky to navigate and to determine how to support Stella, because I obviously don't always know the best way to do it. But I'm definitely seeing that anxiety increase. Maybe not as much ADHD. Is that also a common thing? Do you see ADHD? Like you were saying, it's hard to know which one is triggering what because they kind of work in tandem. But I'm seeing her anxiety becoming like a really challenging thing to manage. So you're for people, like if they suspect that their child, well, I don't know. How would somebody know? Again, somebody told me like maybe Stella's dual diagnosis, maybe you want to consider ABA. And so maybe having a diagnosis would be helpful. That's how I started hearing that maybe this exists. For everybody else who has no idea, what do you say to them? How do they start?
Yeah, I say the first place to start is by talking to your general pediatrician, because they're going to be the person that can ask some of those initial questions to kind of help you triage some of those concerns and point you in the right direction. And then really help think about where would be the best place for evaluation, because as you can see, the evaluation itself may need to be a little bit more comprehensive and detailed than maybe a place that doesn't do evaluations in such a comprehensive manner, because you really need somebody that's going to understand both autism as well as Williams syndrome, and then the overlap in those symptoms, as well as how to kind of differentiate the two a little bit. So your pediatrician is going to be the best place to start. For young children, one thing that I think is really important for us to point out is, something that we hear quite often from our patients is patients coming in worried because in their primary care office, they failed something called the MCHAT, the Modified Checklist for Autism in Toddlers. So for all children, it's recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics that they are screened for autism at either their 18 or their 24 at their 18, and then either their 24 or 30-month well checks at their pediatrician's office. And if you look at the questionnaires, it makes clear sense why children with Williams syndrome would be more prone to fail these screens quite often. Because there's several questions that maybe children with Williams syndrome wouldn't do on the basis of their hearing sensitivity or their gross motor delays or their language delays, for example. So we hear quite often that children with Williams syndrome are failing these screens, and then parents are really concerned about autism. And while some of those, concerns may be valid, some of them are not. And it's maybe just we're picking up on those core features of Williams syndrome. So although I think screening and talking to your pediatrician is about that is great, you also have to kind of think about some of those individual items with your pediatrician and not immediately kind of get scared and kind of jump to conclusions there. But I think that's generally the place that I would recommend starting for all kids. And then if you are working with your with a Williams syndrome clinic team, if they don't have somebody in their core team that's doing autism evaluations, hopefully they have somebody kind of at their institution that they usually connect with and refer to do that sort of evaluation. The other thing I would say too, that's on the front of getting kind of a medical diagnosis. So getting a medical diagnosis versus an educational classification of autism these are kind of two separate things, which this could be a whole other separate podcast.
Go down that path. Okay.
Yeah.
This is like a whole system confusing thing, but to access things like ABA, you need a medical diagnosis. But you could, apart from that, also pursue educational supports for autism, to include things like social supports, for example, like social skills groups at school, or like lunch bunches where kids get together and work with social skills support. So that could be something in a school-based setting as well.
It can be confusing because the school-based diagnosis and then the medical diagnosis don't, always talk to each other, right? Like you can have a school-based diagnosis, and that just really helps with IEP supports and those pieces, right? So your school, not necessarily your diagnosis, but your school classification, I would say, right? Like your IEP is under whatever category. And so that kind of lives in the school. So that, isn't a diagnosis that you would take to be able to access services. It's more of, in the school setting, this is the services and supports that we feel like, that you best need. And so it's possible too that some children might have a IEP classification of autism, or they might have a, totally different IEP classification. And that doesn't mean that you can't work with your school to get social supports embedded into your IEP, right? That, perhaps there are some ways that, we can, work on some of these social skills or work on some of these behaviors without needing, a formal diagnosis. I think that would just be working with your school and seeing, what supports that you feel like your child might benefit from.
Yeah. Is this a wrong question? So like if you had a medical diagnosis of autism, then would you take that to the school and say, we have a medical diagnosis of autism, or would the school have to do their own evaluation and say, yes, we agree?
So generally schools try and work with us in the medical system. and we'll integrate our evaluations into their, IEPs and their plans. Sometimes, though, they choose not to. They're not legally required to, I shall say. Generally, they try and collaborate. But they still are able to make their own determination from a legal standpoint and still technically are able to do their own separate evaluation. And it kind of gets down to what determines how kids qualify for school-based services. Apart from my work with Williams, from just, and working with kids with autism, alternatively, for children with autism who maybe don't have a lot in the way of other developmental impairment or other intellectual impairment, if they're not needing other really significant school-based services, like I may say, yes, this child has autism, but the school could say, those symptoms of autism don't impact them in the school environment, so they don't qualify for an IEP under the autism classification because those symptoms aren't impacting them here. So similarly, a school could say that in the context of a child with Williams syndrome, and just say we don't think that that's the best classification for them here, or they don't need supports in that area as part of their IEP.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I'm looking at just thinking about my own scenario with a person, in a school, and we live in Colorado, and for whatever reason, I've just had an easier time. I know in some school districts in other states that it's really difficult. And so having some of these more concrete medical diagnoses are really important in order to access services. You cannot get services unless you have that. I am more here's all the things we present, right? And sometimes I don't know if this will be helpful for our audience, but I always talk about how Stella has Williams syndrome, but I almost have to break it down even further for teachers, right? Don't think of Stella having Williams syndrome. What you need to know in English is that she presents as somebody who has a very severe case of dyslexia, because then they go, oh, okay, I know how to teach for somebody with dyslexia. Sometimes, not all the time. Or same thing in math. I know what dyscalculia means. I don't know what a Williams syndrome deficit as it relates to math means. So yeah, it's very fascinating as we get into all of these things, because they're, like we said in the beginning, they're all part of the experience. And so, again, understanding what you need to get your child the services that they need is probably the most important. Did I ask this already? Or maybe I asked it in a different way. I don't even know if you can answer this. How should everybody with Williams syndrome get an autism diagnosis? Or are there here's the 3 things that if your person is doing these things means you need to prompt for that next step? Does that make sense? Becca's no, it does not.
I know it does. I'm just thinking, because I think it's a tough question, because I think, I wish I had a really clear answer to say, look for this, and this means, you should pursue an evaluation. But I'm kind of hesitant to do that, because I don't want, a family to say, my child is doing these things, I'm going to go invest a lot of time and money into an autism evaluation when maybe they don't need it, or vice versa, to say, well, I heard this and my child isn't doing this one thing, so I'm not. Because I think it really just depends on, where families are at, and talking with your pediatrician and those pieces. Like I said, I wish there was a really clear answer, because if I had look for this, I would, want to share that, because I know that's a really common question families have, right? How do I know? But I think there's just so much complexity to it, and so it's hard to give a big statement, because I think that there's lots that go into it. I don't know if you have other thoughts, Dr. Barnhardt, but I was I wish I could say do this.
Yeah. So I don't think every child needs an evaluation by any means, but I do think every child, not just every child with Williams syndrome, every child in general should be screened for autism in general. So if your pediatrician is not doing it, you as a family can access and Google MCHAT, modified checklist for autism in toddlers. It's available for free online, and you can fill it out yourself. And if the score is elevated, that could be something you bring in and talk with your pediatrician about and kind of talk about routes of evaluation, and kind of determine where you need to go from there. If your child is outside of the age range where you can do that, unfortunately, there's not great free screening assessments, which is an issue and kind of annoys me. But again, you can come into your pediatrician and talk about that, or talk with their teachers and school team. Teachers and school team members, work with autism, kids with autism in a wide variety of settings and in a lot of different capacities. So they're often a great place to start with too, to say like, hey, are you at all worried about this? I think what may be more helpful for listeners is just to talk about like what is autism and in general what some of those things are to consider. So
Yeah.
Talk about autism. There's two big buckets of symptoms we generally think about, and you have to have symptoms from each of those to make an autism diagnosis. So the first bucket is deficits in social communication and interaction. And the second bucket is what we call restricted interests or repetitive patterns of behavior. What's interesting about the second bucket, restricted interests or repetitive patterns of behavior, this bucket is really common in all children with cognitive delays or language delays. And so, this bucket is in a lot of ways less helpful when trying to differentiate, like, is this a child with Williams syndrome or a child with autism? So, like in our evaluations, a lot of what Dr. Lyren and I are really trying to hone in on are those social communication and interaction deficits a little bit more specifically. And then a lot of what we're also trying to hone in on, even within all those symptoms too, is kind of more the frequency and severity of those symptoms. So for example, it's not uncommon for children with Williams syndrome to be delayed with some of their nonverbal communication skills, like pointing, for example, or referencing of their parents in terms of like their facial expressions, for example. But is it to the frequency and severity that we might expect, or is it more than that? Is it beyond that? So that's kind of how we have to think about it and approach it. And a part of that for us always has to be putting those behaviors we're seeing in the context of that child's overall development. So oftentimes we're doing an updated cognitive assessment alongside the autism assessment, so that we can really have an understanding of where that child is developmentally overall as well. Because if you don't understand that, I think it's really hard to do a good autism assessment. So I know that was a long rambling rant, but hopefully that
was
helped a little
helpful.
bit too.
It actually, yeah, it was actually making me think again, all the stuff I'm learning after the fact, none of it happened beforehand, but I remember, so the behaviors, right, were what triggered somebody to say, maybe you need help through ABA, and to get ABA, maybe you need an autism diagnosis. And so then it was I kind of learned about it that way, but honestly, I don't know if I ever even heard what those two buckets were and what, which ones are more important, like you said, than others, because maybe our people with Williams syndrome already exhibit some of the others. So you said social interaction and
social communication and interaction.
Okay.
And then the other bucket is restricted interest and repetitive patterns of behavior. So I can talk about kind of within those what we're looking at a little bit more if it's helpful. So within social communication and interaction, there's three different areas we're looking at, and you have to have evidence of all three of these things. So the first thing that we're looking at is difficulties with nonverbal communication. So difficulties like understanding emotions, difficulties with things like gesturing, pointing, those kinds of things. The second one is looking at social reciprocity. So having an older kid's ability to have back and forth conversation, or back and forth interaction. So in little kids, we're looking at things like, are they interested in doing things like peekaboo back and forth with their parents and initiating those types of interactions? And then lastly, what are their relationships like? Are they interested in playing with other kids, or is this a child who's kind of more interested in playing by themselves? As you can see, some of those things can be tricky to tease out in a child who maybe has language delays or already has some of those nonverbal communication delays that we expect in a child with Williams syndrome. And then within that second bucket of restricted interest and repetitive patterns of behavior, there's 4 different subcategories, and you have to have 2 of the 4 of these things to make a diagnosis of autism. So the first thing we're looking at is called like repetitive behaviors or stereotype motor mannerisms. So things that would fall into this bucket would be things like repetitive play, so a child that kind of is doing the same thing over and over again, maybe like lining up their toys, things like hand flapping or like walking on toes, spinning in circles. Toe walking is also really common in Williams syndrome, so that's not one that I think about as being helpful when assessing for autism as a side note. The second one that we think about is like behavioral rigidity or difficulties with transitions. The third one is interest. So, what kinds of things does that child like to play with? Are they playing with toys in the way we expect? Are they overly interested in certain areas, which I think in Williams syndrome can also be tricky, because I would say Dr. Lyren and I, we talk about this all the time, although this hasn't been like really proven in the literature in Williams syndrome. We have a lot of patients that, have like, musicians or other people that they're just like very interested in. So that one's always interesting. And then the last one is abnormal sensory input. So like being sensitive to sounds would fall into that bucket in other kids where there's concerns for autism, but in Williams syndrome, we can't look at that one quite as much, so it can get tricky. So you have to have 2 of the 4 of those things. The other thing that's part of the diagnostic criteria that I think for the audience is really important to know is that the onset of all of these symptoms have to have been present in the early developmental period. So I consider that generally like age 2 to 5. So for example, we've had concerns for autism come up in some of our adolescents, but it's really in the setting of kids maybe that are struggling more so with like anxiety or their mood. And when you dig into it, a lot of those symptoms didn't start, until the last 1 to 2 years, and they weren't present in that early developmental period. So it's really not autism. It's more that grouping of symptoms due to their mood, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. That totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's very confusing.
Yeah, exactly.
Now we're full circle in this conversation.
I want to ask Brendan. I'm really curious, Brendan, in your interactions like with the adult Williams syndrome community, or even, more like teens, have there been like questions about autism come up, or like perspectives about like pursuing autism diagnoses? Has that been something you've at all encountered?
Well, I actually have a cousin or a couple cousins that are autistic, so I see it, so to speak. And I'm also a musician, so we're both musicians, so I get it. But yeah, it does come up every once in a while, because I do notice like the rocking and the stimming and, the bouncing up and down while, just sitting and things of that nature. So it doesn't come up that much, but it does come up sometimes.
Well, thank you for sharing. I would say, like, if you're a parent and you're kind of wondering, should I pursue this or think about it? I think some of the takeaways that I would want to hit home are the importance, especially in young children, of early diagnosis and early intervention. A lot of our interventions, like ABA, when used in young children, really are more effective versus like when initiated in older children, and can really impact long-term outcomes, especially in terms of like some of those like adaptive skills. So things like how well that individual can do long-term with, activities of daily living, like feeding, bathing, dressing in themselves, those kinds of things. So I think I see a lot of families that are maybe hesitant to pursue evaluations and kind of are afraid of some of that stigma associated with that diagnosis. So I really would encourage families to really, continue to discuss with their family, loved ones, team of providers, and really, really try and understand some of those benefits, and not be afraid to kind of lean into pursuing some of those evaluations, especially for reasons like you said, Jen, with wait lists for evaluations being so long, and then sometimes there's really long wait lists for treatment too. The other thing I would say is I think something I really value in all of these conversations as we move forward as a field is the voices from autistic adults. And so, I'm hoping moving forward within the WSA, we can specifically think about how we more involve, our autistic adults in the community to kind of hear more about some of their needs and what, future research is needed, and what types of clinical needs that exist that we're not even aware of. So I would say that's something that I'm, continuing to be eager to learn more about.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I would love to see that more too. I think there are more dual diagnosis people in our community than we realize. And it's just like understanding that we always talk about this in the Williams syndrome community, right? Like there's not just one way to have Williams syndrome. There's a lot of different ways to have Williams syndrome, and every experience of Williams syndrome is important. And in this case, those voices of Williams syndrome, autism do matter, and how we treat people with Williams syndrome and autism, that is important to us as a community to make sure that those members feel represented and that they feel supported too. So I appreciate the work that you two are doing. What's your current wait list, to get an evaluation?
For an autism evaluation?
Yeah.
I don't know. What would you say? We're trying to figure out, since we're kind of figuring out the best way to build them into our team. This has kind of been a newer thing that Dr. Lyren, since we took over being involved with our clinic about almost 2 years ago now, we're kind of trying to figure out to get into our full team. I don't know. It's probably about 6 months now, and then scheduling an evaluation after that is maybe just a few months out. So not terribly far out, I would say.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, that's better than what I've heard.
Yeah.
I know. And I've always talked about how, I don't know, because I've never been to a clinic with Stella, what is the value of coming to a Williams syndrome clinic versus just doing it in your local community?
It's a really good question. I think one of the benefits of our full team, is obviously meeting with people that have additional training and expertise in Williams syndrome, but it's really the full team too. Our speech, physical, occupational therapists and our DBP portion of the clinic, they have so much additional expertise in terms of just what to expect developmentally for a child with Williams syndrome. So they can kind of tell you, for example, is your child where you would expect for a child with Williams syndrome, or are they maybe a little bit behind, more advanced, whereas your local speech therapist may just not have that same familiarity. They're also really wonderful about being able to give maybe some more targeted guidance about, some different therapeutic techniques that may be more effective in a child with Williams syndrome. Our whole team is very collaborative too with local providers. I try and collaborate quite often with local primary care providers or a child's local developmental behavioral pediatrician as much as possible to keep care local as much as possible so this is accessible. And then we really try and take a really, team-based approach where we all think collaboratively and engage in a lot of shared decision-making with the family and look at the whole picture. So kind of with our core team, we also have Dr. Beth Kozel with genetics and then Dr. Jessica Bowman with cardiology, and we all work closely together to make sure that we're all on the same page. We have monthly team meetings where we review all of our patients and kind of discuss what's going on and think about things really deeply together. So I think you get, just a different level of care that's really personalized, individualized, and a whole team thinking about things in a different way. So we have a lot of patients that come see us, once a year, and some maybe just check in every 2 to 3 years. So I think it's all about determining what works best for your family, too. And certainly there's a lot of patients and families that feel like they're doing well with their team close to home. And if that's the case, that's totally fine too. Not everybody has to see a Williams syndrome clinic, but we think our team.
I just didn't know. I was I feel like I've done everything the completely wrong way. And I'm shoot, that's what I should have done first. And then now I'm down this road and I'm how do I get out of this? I don't know. It's a very interesting journey that we're on.
Yeah.
I'll add too, because I think, circling back to your question about what else would I want families to know, or those pieces. And I think to your point, I think too, if, someone is watching this or listening and is oh my gosh, my child's a little bit older, did I miss my window? What should I do? I think thinking about, a lot of interventions and supports that, I'm sure as, parents, caregivers, people that you've advocated for your child are the same interventions that we would have recommended, if they also had a diagnosis of autism. Things if you're getting any speech therapy or occupational therapy, or, you did birth to 3 early intervention services, or you worked with your school district to get your child help and supports, or they're getting, any sort of interventions for anxiety or ADHD, like all of these things. So I think that some things, like we talked about, some specific therapies for kids with autism, you might need an autism diagnosis to access, but that doesn't mean that you haven't been doing likely all of the things you would have recommended regardless. I think that's, really important too, that it's not, I just think that, again, I just don't want people to feel like, oh my gosh, like, did I, miss this? And do I need this? Because a lot of times I hear for parents, like, you guys are doing a lot for your family members, and so I just want to make sure that is clear too.
To add on to that, taking care of the entire family is important too, in the midst of all this.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's totally true. Well, I mean, personally, I'm like, I wish I had known then what I know now, right? Which is like, gosh, I wish that if I had to do it over again, that we could have, and we still could, and we will do that visit to a Williams syndrome clinic. But I do think that just having that holistic overview by a team who works with a lot of Williams syndrome people, even if that's, like you said, once every few years, like that is just a great level set to then carry into your local community. And I mean, there's a lot of things that I could go, gosh, had we done that, I wonder if we would have caught this sooner and maybe created their supports and the care that we needed to not get to the point we're in, you know what I mean? And so I do think if anybody, the takeaway from this is personally that I think you should go to a clinic.
Thank you.
Very educated recommendation. Well, if people do want to learn more or chat with the two of you, is there a way that they can do that? Just tell us how they connect with you and your team there at Nationwide.
So we do have up-to-date information on how to get in touch with our clinic on the WSA website. And then if you also just were to Google Nationwide Children's Williams Syndrome Clinic, you'd find our primary website that has more details about all of our team members and kind of the structure and function of our clinic, as well as how to get in touch with us.
Yes.
Very cool.
Thank you, Tio, for coming on.
I definitely think we should have a part 2, because I think there's definitely more to talk about for sure.
This has been the Starry-Eyed Podcast, presented by the Williams Syndrome Association. The show is hosted by Jennifer Keaton and Brendan Lemieux, and produced by me, Joel Listman. Theme song by Tommy Barbarella and Mariella Elm. Got a question for the show? Email us at podcast@williams-syndrome.org or message us at the Starry-Eyed Podcast page on Facebook. Video version of the podcast available on the Williams Syndrome Association channel on YouTube or on Facebook. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or comment on the video version, and maybe it will be featured on a future episode. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Starry-Eyed Podcast wherever you get your podcast delights.